Okay, this lecture will be a little meta. I have asked you to do note taking for one of your ICA assignments. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it. And here we are, chapter 11, note-taking strategies. All right, so the objectives here, why taking notes is important. So we'll talk about the four primary methods of note taking. There's some other ones that you'll see here in the slideshow. By the way, this PowerPoint is not the best put together of the PowerPoints. So I will kind of jump around a little bit to emphasize the things that I think you will think to be important in this. So just bear with as I kind of scroll up and down accordingly. You want to, again, part of this here is to apply strategies to make note-taking more effective, organizing your notes into effective study guides, right? So, because again, this is something that will help you master the material for whatever it is you need to master it for, be it in a test-taking situation or to help you with an assignment, using teacher handouts to complement your notes, and then determining what to do with your notes after the course is complete. So note-taking will support your listening efforts, and kind of related down here, helps you to remember the material better when you write key ideas down, right? So your ability to listen is enhanced by trying to write down and process and figure out what's important. And then the writing of the key ideas down, that actual physical pen to paper activity will help you as well. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit about electronic notes too, if that is your preference. That can certainly work for you, but there is something about the action putting pen to paper that is particularly helpful. This allows you to test your understanding of the material. Gives you a sense of what the instructor thinks is important. You'll get those clues in lecture. It can be as not subtly as when I say, this is an important thing, this is something you should think about for the test, those sorts of things, right? And then it creates your ultimate study guide. So note-taking recommendations is staying organized, notes and handouts separate for each class. And I would say with this to have either a dedicated notebook per class or a section of a notebook per class, and make sure that you are keeping the notes all together in there, and chronologically, of course, is helpful. Of course, here in this kind of situation, there are obviously recorded lectures that you can follow along with, but they also follow the PowerPoints. So you do have some things built in, but as I've said, your mileage may vary with some of the PowerPoints that are here, and then some I think are better than others in terms of dealing with class materials. So they are, again, these are devices that help you to understand what's going on from lecture to lecture, even in a class like this that doesn't have actual physical lectures where we come and sit down. So every time your instructor changes topics, they're suggesting here flip to a new page, allows you to find the material easy and make your notes much cleaner. And we're going to talk about Cornell notes in a second here, and how that might be particularly helpful because, again, of the way that those are organized. Visual clues. So again, if you are putting pen to paper, you don't necessarily need to just rely solely on words on a page. You can highlight, you can underline, you can draw arrows, you can get artsy with it as you so choose. Grouping together similar concepts can be helpful, and then obviously you want to make your notes legible. You're not just trying to record things as quickly as possible. You want to do this in a way to where you can read back and understand it, because those are going to be vital to you as you move forward. Okay. So note-taking systems, and we are going to come back to this slide in a second, but the four main ones that they talked about here were lists, outlines, concept maps, or idea maps, and Cornell. So what they don't have here is just writing things down word for word, what the professor was saying, right? So you do have to do a little bit of processing in order to make this work, right? So lists and outlines are just what they sound like, right? So a list of things that you think are important out of the lecture, and then an outline is actually kind of trying to follow along the way that things are grouped. So for example, when I do the 3 kind of paragraphs lecture, you saw that in 3 separate videos. So there's an intro, body paragraph, and conclusion. So those are, again, if you're thinking about Roman numeral outlines, those are the 1, 2, 3, right? Those are the big headings, and then there's subheadings underneath that, right? There are points that I was generally trying to make about intros, about body paragraphs, about conclusions, and those typically had their own slides, right? Or had several slides dedicated to each kind of major concept within that larger grouping. So being able to see a PowerPoint and follow along with that will certainly help you in the outlining. Sometimes you do just have to guess, right? So it is just completely dependent on the instructor and how the instructor organizes things. Okay. And then there's some other things that they talked about here that are not in the textbook necessarily. Some will be useful in certain classes, like a timeline, for example, which I think we have an example of on the next page. Molecular paleontology, okay. So certainly in cases where there are histories and you're trying to see a progression, a timeline can be helpful. This is the mind map, and what you're going to notice here is that there is kind of an outline in an effect. So there's the overarching topic, and then keywords, use, clarity, center, style. These are all, again, kind of major headings within that lecture, right? And then you see these things kind of branching off from there, and like keywords, all kinds of things branching off that. Style, it's just personal style, and then this notion of developing a style, right? So, and this is if you're more visually oriented. This is if you're more artistic, maybe. Again, to me, this would kind of baffle me. This is not how I process information necessarily. I am visual, but not in this way. So I need much more kind of straightforward reading and clarity. But this could be extremely helpful. But again, this is an opportunity to organize, but still have some fluidity within that, right? So the good thing about this is that you can just do a spoke off the main circle, and you can start kind of a new trajectory that way. And again, you just want to organize your paper accordingly to be able to do this. But this is something where, you know, again, if you can get this into a system and you don't have to think too hard about it, this can be great. And then there's a slide down here which just kind of shows that sometimes you will get slides from, or PowerPoint printouts from the instructor, and you'll be expected to just kind of put your additional notes alongside there. The printouts will look something like that, right? So that can be helpful too. Again, you're not going to get that necessarily from all instructors. I had one in a grad class last year where, yeah, it was really strange. He would put some of the info, but not all of the info in there, and you were expected to fill things in. He would lecture, and he would present things up on the screen, and his slides would be the full slides. You would have a printout that was about half of the information. So things that he wanted you to remember that were really important, you were supposed to write in yourself. So I found that a little weird. So I will not lie, but it did work in its weird way. I was able to prepare for tests based on that. So it had its place in the class, certainly, but I did not adopt that in my teaching style, we will say. All right, so Cornell method. I'm going to go back here because this is a really good depiction of it. And again, you're going to notice standard 8.5 by 11 sheets. So you got a 6 by 9 block right here for your notes. You have about 2.5 inches. You can make this a little narrower if you want, but they suggest that, and that's for cues. And then a summary down here. So first thing you do during class is you take your notes, right? So just try whatever, if it's an outline, if it's a concept map, if it's a list, whatever it is that you do to take notes, you go ahead and just get that down on the paper as it's happening. And then you do some processing after. So this will help you to actually get these into your long-term memory, because you're looking at the notes immediately after, and you're trying to do two things with those. First of all, any kind of questions, diagrams, prompts to help you study, anything that kind of jumps out to you is fair game for the cues. And then the summary is just the main ideas, right? And again, that's a quick reference type thing. So you can look at the bottom of your notes and you can say, oh, okay, Professor West was talking about the 3 kinds of paragraphs. These are my notes on the intro paragraph. So these are kind of the main takeaways about the intro paragraph. So again, when you have for example, the in the PowerPoints here at the start and at the end, you have main points that are emphasized, right? So, all right. And then general tips on note taking. You want to be prepared. You want to label, number, and date all the notes at the top of the page. The date is particularly important. That will help you make sense of things, keep things chronological. You want to use that obviously in conjunction with the syllabus to see where those things match up. Obviously for this class, we have certain chapters that we're dealing with in certain weeks, and since we are not doing normal lectures, you would just put the week down, but that would still help you to keep and make sense of it, right? Leaving space between topics, that'll allow you to jump in and write some additional notes later, and also just to separate things out, right? Just to physically have space between those. And then if you are using a laptop, position it so you can see the instructor on the whiteboard over your screen. Important here, don't try to capture everything that is said, right? So the temptation can be to do that, but it will be really hard and you may get lost, right? So try to absorb, listen, and then write things that are important to you. If the instructor writes things on the board, though, you do want to copy those things down because generally the instructor that's a signal that this is important information, this is organizational, this is foundational, this is providing some sort of structure. It may not necessarily be an outline, but they will be, key terms or things that you want to be mindful of, things that the instructor is feeling important enough to convey, that he or she has taken the time to write things on the board. Okay. Signals and abbreviations, if you can make sense of them, are helpful. Creating a symbol to use when you fall behind or get lost in your note taking. So you can maybe go back, read, fill in the gaps that way. Reviewing your notes as soon after class as possible is how that sentence is supposed to go. Same day is best, right? So you can just keep it fresh in your mind. Remember, we talked about the Ebbinghaus and forgetting curve and the idea that you retain about a third of what you hear after 24 hours if things are not enforced, right? So that's why that same day is helpful. And then write a summary of the main ideas of class in your own words. So organizing, right? So printing notes if you used a computer. Note cards are really good, flashcards for helping with key terms. Again, I think Cornell method is particularly helpful for organizing and processing, right? So you can write notes on your notes. Again, you don't want to obscure things, but again, they should be something that you don't just do once and then it sits in your notebook for the rest of the semester, right? So it should be something you're actively going back to, adding to. Again, that's why Cornell method is so good, because that will actually help you to engage with the notes after you've taken them, and you're adding things to them, and you're making them more of the learning process than just, okay, these things sit here, I took these notes, I'm now supposed to remember that. Again, you have to keep going back to things and actively learning things to get them from your short to your long-term memory, or at least long enough to deal with for what you need to deal with during the semester. Speaking of, what should you keep? If you took notes as a prerequisite for another course, you should hang on to that, where it's part of, they say, standard progression of courses that build upon each other. So that makes a lot of sense. If it pertains to your major, if you're just interested in the course subject, that's fine. I mean, again, you might want to pack rat and keep every single set of notes that you have, but you may honestly not go back to them if they're not things that you're going to use. So I would say for this class, this class is foundational to college. So if you still find yourself struggling, if you think that there are lessons here that are going to help you in future semesters, then yeah, definitely hang on to these notes. If you feel like you got the hang of it, you wouldn't necessarily need to keep these, because this isn't really a prerequisite for other courses. This is more how to college, right? So but that could still be helpful. So again, just kind of up to you. It won't hurt you to keep notes, except you'll have less space to do other things. So if space is a consideration, then yeah, something to keep in mind too. All right. So after effective listening, good note taking is the most important skill for academic success. Again, those things go hand in hand, right? So listening will help you process the information, and good note taking will also help you process the information. Choose among effective note-taking styles that work best for you. So that's really important, right? So this can be a time to try things out. And again, this is why for the ICA, I was having you take notes with one of the systems that we talked about. Outlines can work well for taking notes on a laptop when the instructor is well organized. If the instructor is not well organized, then yeah, it might not be necessarily as helpful. Concept map notes are good for showing the relationships among ideas, right? Cornell method is effective for calling out key concepts and organizing notes for review. Again, I'm going to recommend that just because I think that what you take notes for, this is going to be particularly helpful. Instructor handouts and PowerPoint presentations help with, but do not replace personal note-taking. So you can rely on those to a certain degree, but it's just information that you're going to read. You still need to get that more internalized, and the note-taking process can actually help with that. And then you want to keep notes organized in a way that makes it easy to study for tests and other uses in the future, right? So yeah, again, that is the extent of the Chapter 11 lecture. Hope that helped, and looking forward to seeing your notes and your thoughts on the notes that you took from this.